The fog ahead parted to reveal a tunnel I didn't remember entering. The road had been nothing but black and white for hours. The hum of the engine thrummed against my ribs like a heartbeat I couldn't quiet. Tires hissed wetly over slick asphalt, each curve a soft squeal under the headlights. Fog curled around the beams in thick, curling fingers, hugging the pavement and the edges of the guardrails like some liquid smoke that wanted to pull me in. I'd been driving for so long that I could feel the rhythm of the road in my chest, and the monotony of night and fog had begun to dull the edges of reality. Then it appeared. A break in the fog, sudden and sharp. My headlights cut through the mist and illuminated an entrance I didn't remember. A tunnel, carved from rock and darkness, its mouth yawning like some impossible cavity in the world. No sign had warned me, no glimmer of concrete or reflective marker hinted that a tunnel would rise from the hills. For a long moment, I thought my eyes were playing tricks on me, that the fog had twisted in some optical illusion. But no, there it was, real and concrete, swallowing the road in front of me. I slowed. The tires hissed more sharply, wet gravel crunching underfoot. The GPS glowed softly on the dashboard. Continue straight for 7 miles. I studied the screen. It made no mention of a tunnel. The route was just a line, uninterrupted, perfectly predictable. And yet, the asphalt beneath me curved exactly into the tunnel's mouth, as if the road had always existed to lead me here, whether I remembered it or not. A thin, cold unease seeped into me. I gripped the steering wheel tighter. The air smelled different here, damp and metallic, like old stone and rain that had pooled underground. My breath fogged inside the car, though the heater was running. I entered the tunnel. It was wider than the mouth had promised. Taller, too. My headlights bounced off walls polished smooth, but not by human hands. There was an unnatural symmetry, the way the surface reflected light and then seemed to warp it slightly. My reflection appeared in the mirrors and the side windows, but something was wrong. The movements didn't perfectly match my own. A flicker here, a hesitation there, as if I were looking at me from a memory I had once lived but had forgotten. The hum of the engine felt different inside the tunnel, deeper, slower. Time itself seemed to stretch. My pulse became unmoored, and seconds bled into one another. I could hear the soft trickle of water somewhere above, though the ceiling was impossibly high and smooth, with no signs of leakage. I tried to focus on the road. The lane markings were faint but present, though they occasionally fractured, doubling or shifting under the headlights' glare. Every time I corrected the steering, the lane subtly adjusted as if the tunnel were accommodating my anxiety. My hands trembled. I caught myself gripping the wheel too tightly and realized the veins in my forearms had changed. Pale, thin, unfamiliar. Signs appeared. Yellow diamonds with impossible messages, reflective in my headlights. Caution. Familiar drivers only. I blinked, startled. The words seemed to shimmer on the surface, almost moving, and yet my eyes refocused and they were stable again. A name flashed further down the wall, carved into the stone, Marrow Creek. My heart skipped. I didn't remember Marrow Creek. And yet the word felt familiar, like a place I had visited but couldn't place in time. The exit should have been visible. Even at a stretch of 7 miles, I should have seen light at the far end. But it was gone. The tunnel narrowed slightly, curving around a bend my headlights couldn't reach, and when I tried to gauge distance, the walls had shifted, stretching the interior in impossible ways. I felt the stomach-dropping awareness that the tunnel did not exist in ordinary space. I thought about turning back. I wanted to reverse, to get out. But the road behind me was no longer as I remembered. Asphalt had rippled. The lane markings behind me doubled, then fractured, creating dead ends that hadn't existed moments ago. The guardrails twisted at odd angles. I realized, with a growing chill, that the tunnel wasn't just ahead, it was everywhere. It had rewritten the path behind me. My mind started to falter. I tried to recall the last gas station, the last recognizable turn. Nothing was certain. Every memory I had of the route seemed to slide away when I tried to hold onto it. Faces of towns, names of hills, curves of the road, they were vague, interchangeable. I was beginning to question whether I had ever really left the town I'd last passed or if I had been driving this road for longer than I remembered. I slowed further, gripping the wheel until my knuckles whitened. The fog inside the tunnel seemed to press inward, cold and thick, smelling faintly of wet stone and iron. I caught glimpses of myself in the side mirrors, again noticing the subtle wrongness. The angle of my shoulders, the way my head tilted when I checked the mirrors, the reflections not quite lining up with my movements. Then, without warning, the tunnel seemed to pulse with attention. The lane markings ahead shimmered and split, doubling into parallel lanes where none had existed. My pulse spiked, and I felt an irrational compulsion to follow a lane that was not straight ahead but offset slightly to the left. When I obeyed the impulse, I noticed that the walls now bore carvings, letters, shapes, that corresponded to fleeting thoughts I hadn't spoken aloud. A fear of being trapped, the desire to leave, even the faint memory of forgetting something important. The tunnel responded. It remembered. Time dilated. Minutes stretched into eternities. I glimpsed moments from my own life, not my own memories, but echoes, fragments that belonged to a version of me that had already been here. A blurred vision of myself driving this tunnel before, alone, unaware, the same widening panic in my chest. And I realized, with horror, that the tunnel remembers you. It holds all who pass through it, imprints them into its walls, into its asphalt, into the shifting geometry of its interior. I stopped the car. Engine idling, headlights illuminating nothing beyond the foggy stone. I tried to recall the tunnel's entrance, the last recognizable marker outside it. My mind offered only a blank. The world behind me was unrecognizable, as if I had never entered this stretch of highway at all. And yet, there was a memory I couldn't shake, a fleeting thought of a time when I had exited the tunnel, stepping onto the asphalt with a sense of relief, only to forget it immediately. I realized then that the tunnel was not a place one enters, it was a memory made solid. A construct that had stored me before and would store me again, each passage eroding the certainty of who I was, what I knew, what I remembered. The reflections in the windows flickered again. My hands, my face, my posture, they shifted subtly, as if the tunnel was testing which version of me to imprint next. Panic clawed at me. I tried to reverse, but the lane lines ahead curved in ways that my tires refused to follow. The road was alive, bending and reshaping itself in response to my mind, my fear, my attempts at control. I felt myself fraying, identity slipping, thoughts that I couldn't claim as my own floated in the corners of my mind. A faint whisper, carried on the damp air, repeated a phrase I didn't remember thinking aloud. "You have been here before." I flinched. The words were mine, or mine once. The tunnel had remembered them. It had remembered me. Minutes, or was it hours, passed. The tunnel stretched endlessly, the fog curling into impossible arcs, the walls shimmering with carvings that were almost, but not quite, legible. I understood, finally, that there would be no exit unless it chose to show itself. That the outside world, the map, the GPS, all of it, was irrelevant. The tunnel existed in another logic. A memory, a pattern, a trap, a keeper. I pressed on, not because I wanted to, but because the lane ahead called to me. My reflection in the side window paused, unnaturally, like a shadow waiting for approval. And somewhere deep inside, I felt recognition, not conscious, not remembered, but primal, etched into my nervous system. I had driven this tunnel before. Or someone like me had. And I had forgotten. The fog thickened around the headlights, curling like fingers over the asphalt, over the hood, over the edges of my awareness. The tunnel pulsed subtly, alive and attentive, as if sensing my thoughts, my fears, my fading grip on certainty. I realized that it didn't lead anywhere. It didn't need to. It was infinite, self-contained, remembering all who passed, erasing all who forgot. And I was already a part of it. I drove on. The lane stretched into darkness. Time no longer measured anything. The hum of the engine matched the pulse in my chest. My hands on the wheel felt both familiar and strange. And somewhere, in the space between thought and perception, I understood the terrible truth. I had entered this tunnel before, and the tunnel had never forgotten. It waits. It remembers. And I will drive it again. My dashboard displayed a warning. Passenger restraint failure, but I was alone. The hum of the engine was steady, a low, constant drone beneath me, the tires whispering wetly across the asphalt. The night had settled into a quiet so absolute that the occasional hiss of wind over the wheel wells felt deafening. Headlights cut through the fog that clung to the edges of the highway like a living thing, curling over the guardrails and spilling across patches of wet asphalt. My eyes flicked from the road to the dashboard, absorbing the soft glow of gauges and indicators, and then back again. That's when it appeared. Passenger restraint failure. Bright red letters flashed across the dashboard, accompanied by a soft chime that was almost polite. My stomach tightened. I blinked, certain my mind had played a trick, but the message persisted. The seatbelt icon glowed insistently. I was alone. The passenger seat was empty. No bags, no stray jacket. Nothing. I reached over cautiously, my hand trembling, to tug at the belt. It was perfectly retracted, taut and unyielding, as it always had been. No one was there. My fingers lingered over the smooth plastic of the latch. Nothing. I swallowed hard and exhaled slowly, willing myself to believe it was a system error, a glitch, a momentary misfire. My car was new. I'd barely driven it a month, meticulously maintained, and it had never once displayed a warning without cause. But the message persisted. Passenger restraint failure. I glanced at the seat. Shadows pooled in the footwell, cast by my own headlights through the windshield. For a fleeting moment, I could have sworn I saw a subtle dip in the cushion, a tiny indent, as if someone had just shifted in their seat. I jerked my head back toward the dashboard, heart hammering. It had to be my imagination. The road stretched out before me, slick and featureless. Fog curled at the edges of the headlights, thickening, then dissipating. The trees along the roadside appeared closer than they should have, and for a brief instant, their shadows fell across the interior of the car, sharp and angular, like fingers pressing against the glass. I shook my head. Night tricks. Fog. Fatigue. I tried to ignore it, focusing on the rhythmic hum of the tires, the familiar groove of the asphalt. But then the subtle cues began. The seatbelt. It had moved. I didn't touch it. I hadn't adjusted the seat, hadn't even brushed against the passenger's side belt in hours. Yet the strap had shifted slightly, pulled forward a fraction of an inch, then settled back against the seat. A phantom weight, or the suggestion of one, pressed into the cushion for a heartbeat, gone before I could confirm it. I tried to rationalize. Maybe a breeze from the cracked window. The vibration of the car. A stray piece of clothing. But the window was closed. The doors were locked. Nothing had shifted. And yet, that seatbelt had moved. I glanced at the side mirror. My reflection stared back at me, pale under the dashboard glow. But the image was off. A fraction of a second behind my movements, like a lag in a video feed. I blinked, and it corrected itself. I rubbed my eyes. It had to be fatigue. Driving alone, hours in the dark, the mind plays tricks. I turned my attention back to the road. Fog swirled in low curtains, clinging to the asphalt. The hum of the tires, the low drone of the engine, those were constants. And yet, with each glance at the passenger seat, the sense of wrongness grew. The cushion seemed slightly depressed at times. Shadows shifted unnaturally along the interior door panel, reflections in the side window catching angles they shouldn't. I reached over again, tentatively, and brushed my hand across the seat. Nothing. The leather was smooth, cold, empty. But the air carried a subtle scent, faintly musky, like fabric long worn. I flinched and pulled my hand back, heart racing. I hadn't brought anything here. No jacket, no backpack, nothing. I considered pulling over. I needed to pull over. But the highway stretched endlessly, fog rolling ahead like a wall. The GPS glowed softly on the dashboard, calm and unfeeling, continue straight for 12 miles. No exit markers. No gas stations. Just me and the road, and the seat beside me that shouldn't exist. A small vibration under my fingers made me jump. My phone, resting in the console, displayed a text notification I didn't remember receiving. I tapped the screen. Nothing. The message vanished. No sender. No time stamp. Just the lingering unease. I tried to focus on the engine's hum, but it too began to feel wrong. The pitch shifted subtly with each glance toward the seat. A resonance I couldn't place, like metal straining under a load that wasn't there. The air itself seemed heavier, pressing against my chest. Another movement. The seatbelt strap shifted again, more insistently this time, sliding slightly to the side as if someone had settled into the passenger seat. I froze. My pulse hammered. I couldn't rationalize it. My logical mind screamed that I was imagining things. My instincts screamed the opposite. I glanced again at the side mirror. My own reflection looked back, but something was different. The curve of my jaw was slightly off, my posture a fraction misaligned. I swiveled the mirror, adjusted the angle. It corrected immediately, yet the feeling persisted. The reflection wasn't mine entirely. It had memory, awareness, of something I could not place. The fog thickened. Trees pressed close to the edge of the highway. I could feel their shadows scrape across the interior. A faint chill pressed against my neck. My eyes flicked to the passenger side again. The seatbelt now tugged slightly, as if under gentle pressure. Not heavy, but enough to make the leather ripple, to suggest a form that shouldn't exist. I spoke aloud, voice cracking. I'm alone. The words sounded hollow, swallowed immediately by the hum of the tires. There was no reply, no shift, no confirmation. Just the subtle tug of the belt, a pressure that followed me when I glanced away, relaxed when I looked directly. My memories began to fracture. I thought about earlier drives, the time I'd spent in this car. But the recollections were hazy, incomplete. Faces in the rearview mirror that weren't mine. A fleeting presence in the passenger seat during a trip I couldn't remember. A laugh, faint, carried on a draft I had no recollection of opening. It didn't belong to me, or if it did, I had long since forgotten it. The road itself seemed to respond. Every time I looked away from the seat, subtle distortions appeared in the asphalt. Lane markings shifted. Shadows fell wrong. Reflections in the windows and mirrors flickered like half-formed images, but only when I wasn't looking directly. It was as if the car anticipated my attention, and shaped reality around it, holding a memory of someone who had once occupied the seat beside me. Or perhaps someone who never left. I tried to pull over. My fingers fumbled with the gearshift. But the shoulder dissolved into fog, replaced by asphalt that stretched endlessly. The hum of the engine deepened, vibrating through the steering wheel and seat, syncing with my heartbeat. The dashboard glowed insistently. Passenger restraint failure. I exhaled sharply. I don't understand. My voice sounded foreign to me, echoed too long in the small cabin. I could feel the seat beneath me, solid, real, but the one beside me was not. Yet it pressed subtly, just enough to suggest weight. A presence. Recognition. Another subtle tug of the seatbelt. My chest tightened. My grip on reality wavered. Could I trust my senses? Could I trust my memories? The road stretched ahead in fog, featureless, unyielding. I had no recollection of reaching this stretch before. And yet, a deep, inexplicable certainty gnawed at me. I had sat behind this wheel. I had driven this stretch alone. And the passenger seat had waited. The chill intensified. I glanced once more at the reflection in the side window. My face stared back, but the eyes were not quite mine. The jaw, the tilt of the head, the subtle shift of expression, they belonged to a version of me that remembered a companion long gone, or perhaps never there at all. I slowed. The hum of the engine fell away, leaving only the wet hiss of tires over asphalt. The fog curled around the headlights like smoke, pressing into the cabin. I understood then, without thinking, without questioning, the car did not malfunction. It remembered. It remembered someone who had always occupied the seat beside me. Or someone who had never left. The warning light glowed red. The seatbelt tugged again. Subtle, gentle, insistent. A heartbeat against the emptiness of the passenger seat. And I realized, with a slow, sinking certainty, that I was not alone. Not ever. I had only thought I was.